In 1996, a volunteer conservator discovered a fragment of a human arm bone on the banks of the Tollense River in northern Germany. Embedded deep in the bone was a flint arrowhead. From that moment, the history of Central Europe began to shake. Subsequent excavations uncovered not just a single human body, but an entire ancient battlefield stretching hundreds of meters along the river. Over 13,000 fragments of human and animal bones were found, many bearing clear signs of cuts, punctures from spears, arrows, and daggers. Numerous skulls were crushed, spines shattered, and limbs severed. Some skeletons still had bronze arrowheads lodged in the bone. Many individuals were killed while riding horses. The evidence is undeniable. This is the largest prehistoric battlefield ever excavated in Europe. It is estimated that between 3,000 and 5,000 warriors fought here around 1,300 BCE, a time when Egyptian civilization was flourishing and Troy had yet to fall. And yet, history records nothing of this battle. No epics, no legends, no accounts from any known culture. An event so large, it claimed over 1,000 lives in a single day. Completely erased from human memory, the question is, why? Why did a battle of such scale, involving thousands of warriors and metal weapons, leave no trace in tradition or written records? Who were the dead? Who were the victors? And why did they fight in a remote, swampy area with a population density of fewer than 5 people per square kilometer at the time? Tollense is the greatest mystery of modern European archaeology, and it is only beginning to be unraveled. Part 2. 5,000 men fought. Anthropological analysis of hundreds of bone fragments showed that most of the victims were males between the ages of 20 and 40, the prime age for combat. Many bore signs of previous injuries that had healed, broken forearms that had mended, skull fractures that had fused, rib cages deformed from past impacts. These were not farmers forced into battle. They were seasoned fighters, men who had wielded weapons before, who had survived past clashes. But not this one. Most of the skeletons showed no signs of medical treatment. No splints, no surgical cuts, no evidence of intervention. All wounds were final, piercing, slicing, crushing. An arrowhead lodged through a shoulder blade, a sword strike that split a jaw in two, a skull smashed like a ripe melon. There were no survivors to tend the wounded, no time to save anyone. The battle may have lasted less than a day, with such speed and violence that neither side could recover their dead. There were no burial rites, no graves, only flowing water to wash them away, mud to bury them, and silence to cover it all for 3,000 years. No ancient texts mention this battle. No name, no heroes, no legends. Only one thing is certain. This was the site of a battle that was organized, commanded with a clear objective and devastating consequences. Part 3. The weapons of ancient warriors. Archaeologists found dozens of bronze arrowheads, some still attached to charred wooden shafts, some embedded directly in human bones. Many other arrows were made of flint, a type of weapon common during the Stone Age, but thought to have been obsolete for thousands of years by the time the battle occurred. The presence of both metal and flint weapons on the same battlefield reveals something remarkable. Two armies with completely different levels of technology and armament clashed here. One side may have been a local force, equipped only with rudimentary tools made of wood and stone. The other was a more organized army from farther away, bearing bronze weapons, the hallmark of power in that era. It wasn't just handheld weapons. Horse bones were also found at the site, identified as belonging to at least 5 different animals. In one case, an arrow pierced a rider's arm, indicating he had been shot while on horseback. This suggests the more elite force may have had cavalry, serving as commanders, riding horses, directing troops, and striking down infantry warriors from a distance. One area, caused archaeologists to pause for days. 1,478 bone fragments within just 12 square meters. This may have been the site of an ambush, a point of entrapment, or a deliberate mass killing. It's possible the weaker force was cornered here, fighting to the last man. Also noteworthy, no swords were found, but many bones showed sharp, straight, deep cuts, typical of bronze sword wounds. It's possible the swords were all taken after the battle, since valuable metal spoils were always the first to be collected. Tollense wasn't just a place where people died. It was a battlefield where the weapons technology of the age collided. Flint clashed with bronze. Crude clubs struck against armored warriors. Horsemen charged into crowds wielding sticks and axes. And it was precisely this contrast between advanced technology and desperate resistance that made Tollense a killing ground unlike any other. Part 4. Unusual Traces. While diving for human remains at the bottom of the Tollense River, an archaeological team discovered something unlike any other war debris found before. A cluster of 31 bronze artifacts, lying close together as if once contained in a box or leather pouch that had since rotted away. Inside this ancient kit was a miniature world, curved blade knives, intricately carved awls, a chisel showing signs of long-term use, and coiled bronze tubes. Scattered among them were tiny bronze fragments, possibly scrap or primitive currency. To archaeologists, these weren't just tools. They were the belongings of a skilled individual, someone with a specialized role and refined expertise. This man was not a soldier. He may have been a traveling smith, an armor repairer, a jeweler, or a highly skilled technician trader. And his presence on this battlefield was no accident. Analysis of the design, decorative style, and the bronze alloy used in the toolkit revealed they did not originate from the Tollense region. Similar items have only been found in southern or central Europe, hundreds of kilometers from the site. This means someone or a group had traveled a long distance to reach this place, bringing with them not only skills, but rare, valuable goods. Why would a craftsman be on a battlefield? Perhaps he accompanied the army to repair weapons on site, like a mobile forge. Or he was part of an armed merchant convoy, transporting goods, raw materials, or precious metals along an ancient trade route. There's also the possibility that he had a special mission, a witness, a technician, or even a target. Tollense, therefore, was not merely a site of armed conflict. It was a strategic junction, a place where people from distant lands gathered, bringing with them technology, ambition, and reasons never written down. This discovery changes the entire perception of the battle. It was not a local clash between neighboring tribes. It was a multi-regional confrontation, organized, supplied, and structured with clear roles and specialized tasks. At Tollense, people didn't only die by weapons. Some died carrying secrets they never had the chance to share. Part 5. The DNA of the dead. After human bones were excavated from Tollense, the biggest question was, where did they come from? Was this a clash between distinct peoples, a distant invading force versus a weaker local population? Or was it something more complex? To find answers, scientists sequenced the genomes of the 14 most intact skeletons. The results were surprising. All individuals carried genetic markers typical of Central European populations. None came from the Mediterranean, the Balkans, or Scandinavia, contrary to earlier theories based on the diversity of weapons and artifacts. Even more intriguing was the analysis of the lactase persistence gene, the ability to digest milk in adulthood, now common in Europe. The findings? None of the individuals had this gene. Despite widespread belief that the ability to digest milk had already spread across Europe thousands of years earlier, the warriors at Tollense still carried the ancestral version, lactose intolerant, like their hunter-gatherer forebears. This opens up a critical possibility. At the time of the battle, some of the most important genetic adaptations in European history, such as milk digestion, had not yet become widespread. The Tollense fighters still lived like ancient communities, relying on meat, wild plants, and primitive cranes, far from being as evolved as we once assumed. Another debated clue: traces of millet found in the dental plaque of some skeletons. Millet was a cereal crop commonly cultivated in the south, in regions like the Balkans or Hungary during that era. Initially, this led many to speculate that one of the warring factions had come from the far south. However, later studies refuted this idea, suggesting that millet had been imported and was already scattered throughout Central Europe. Taken together, there is no evidence that the Tollense battle was a confrontation between natives and outsiders. On the contrary, it was a war between communities of shared origin. They may have traded with one another, shared cultural traditions, and even been distant kin. Part 6. Why did they fight? Tollense wasn't a place where someone stumbled into and started a random brawl. It was a crossroads, a critical link in a prehistoric trade network. Using geomagnetic imaging and laser topography, scientists discovered a submerged structure beneath the muddy soil, a wooden bridge or causeway stretching up to 120 meters across the swampy terrain. It had been built centuries before the battle, but clearly renovated just before the clash occurred. This bridge wasn't merely a transportation structure. It was a strategic gateway, the only safe crossing over the Tollense River for tens of kilometers. And in the Bronze Age, that wasn't just a path, it was a lifeline for transporting essential resources. Tin, the key ingredient needed to produce bronze, wasn't available everywhere. It had to be mined from distant mountains like the Erzgebirge or Cornwall, then transported overland through multiple relay points to reach metallurgical centers. Amber from the Baltic Sea, pearls from Persia, and colored glass from the Mediterranean all have been found in ancient graves near Tollense. This proves that the area was once part of a vast, continental-scale trade route. So what happened? A growing theory suggests this: a well-organized and heavily equipped army, possibly from the south or west, attempted to cross the bridge and seize control of this vital trade route. They had cavalry, bronze weapons, and may have been backed by a larger power, a chieftain, an alliance, or an expanding culture. And they were stopped. By whom? Possibly by local groups, those who lived off trade, transported goods, or simply wanted to protect their territory and livelihood. The confrontation was no longer a tribal skirmish. It became a battle for control of a prehistoric supply chain. A supply chain powered by feet, backs, horses, and blood. Thousands of years ago, war was still war. The motives remained the same: land, resources, roots, and power. Tollense was no exception. It is simply the first and only clear archaeological evidence that humanity has fought over trade routes long before nations even existed. And if a battle this large could be forgotten for 3,000 years, how many others have we also forgotten? Tollense is the earliest known buried battlefield in European history, and possibly the first war fought over geopolitics, over the control of trade, over a future decided by the strong. Today, we use civilized terms: territory, borders, sovereignty. But at Tollense, it was just mud, bones, and a silence that lasted 32 centuries. We think war is a modern invention. Tollense proves the opposite. Humans have waged organized strategic war since before they could even write. And if such a brutal conflict could vanish from history, how many crimes, treaties, glories, or betrayals still lie buried, waiting to be told? History is not always written by the victors. Sometimes it is buried by the survivors. If you believe there is value in telling the stories that were never told, of people, civilizations, and battles the world has forgotten, subscribe to the channel now, because the past never truly sleeps, and we are still living in the long shadow of wars older than nations themselves.